friends, I'm Liz.
I'm Robby. Welcome back to our channel, Bookworm Couple. Today we are finally going to be talking about the last book in the Throne of Glass series, Kingdom of Ash. And I can't believe we're finally here. It's been, I guess, now 8 months.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Many books.
Yeah, and this is a journey that I actually started a few years ago when the books were still coming out.
Right?
No. I think I got to Heir of Fire, actually, which now, reading it makes me realize why I stopped, because I did not like that book.
Favorite.
But yeah, so yeah, it's been quite the long journey, and I'm really glad I got to read this whole series and finish out the story. Yeah, I had a fun time reading it. I feel like you're constantly afraid that any criticism I bring against the books in this series means I automatically hate the whole thing.
Maybe.
I have criticisms of most of the books I've ever read in my whole life.
Yeah, no,
some of my favorites.
And
I'm sure most people do. Nothing is perfect. But yeah, I had a lot of fun reading these. This was a really good time, and it was nice to read something that was a little bit lighter in between some of the sometimes more dense things. Not always, but sometimes I do. Yeah, and I had a really good time. I'm glad I finished the series. My first complete Sarah J. Maas series. I feel like such a book talk girl. I feel great.
You are a book talk girly.
Yeah, I feel great.
Good job,
such a book talk girly. So how does this book rank? I mean, I haven't even thought about whether or not we're going to make like a series wrap-up video or anything like that, but how does this book rank to you when compared to all the other books in the series?
This is my absolute favorite.
This was your favorite?
100%
by like a lot?
by far.
Okay, alright.
This book was an emotional experience for me.
Did you read all of these in one, or were you reading them while they were being published?
No. I read them like over, it was maybe 2 years ago now, like over the month of April. Like I read all of them.
All in a month? Okay, yeah. Interesting. Because I had such an interesting experience at the end of this book. The amount of time that passes within this book.
Yeah.
As opposed to like the amount of time I've spent reading it,
sure.
Which I felt it was very. This isn't really a spoiler, but I felt at the end of the series, and this is probably because I did start reading this series a decade ago, whenever it started coming out. That's when I first started reading the books. The end of the series, it feels like you've been on this huge, very long journey with these characters, except for the fact that in the book you haven't.
Yeah.
It's not long. So it's just an interesting. I don't want to say choice by the author, but just like an interesting juxtaposition there, just with.
I feel like that's every series I read, though, personally.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Which I kind of understand with like the idea of like keeping the momentum of like, as an author, if you'd have to go. Excuse you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. These chairs are loud today.
Squeak. As I say, as an author, if you'd have to like go back and essentially like explain any sort of life that was happening in between character building, because people are sure to change over time, so I understand why, but I do, I think it is.
I don't know. I think I just like. I guess I'm finding out in myself that I like time skips. I don't know. I kind of like when it feels like a meaty amount of time has gone by.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think I've read many 8-book series where they're like it's been
a year. Yeah, right.
So I think maybe that's just kind of what my brain is struggling to wrap its mind around.
That's fair.
If that sentence makes any sense. But anyway, I had a blast reading this. I think that this book is chock full of like more epic moments per capita than like you could buy like 4 of the other books in the series and not get. Yeah, it's wild. So I think it's a great final book to a series. I really, really do. I had a lot of fun. I think it does a really good job of wrapping up, basically every storyline. I can't speak to how everyone feels about each one and whether each one is perfect or not. Not entirely, relevant to just the fact that I think it did actually wrap up everything, which is nice because I've read a lot of series where that just isn't the case, and you're just like, well, that storyline, who knows? And that's, just part of reading large epic fantasy books. Sometimes things don't get resolved. But I really, really enjoyed it. And boy, oh boy, did everyone get a cameo. Holy cow. They had characters that I looked whose names had not been mentioned since the first book popping up here, playing like a pretty significant supporting role. And I was like, whoa, okay, great. All right, great. That particular surprise was really funny for me. I was just like, oh my God. I don't think we talked about them for a very long time.
Gotta bring them back for the final.
Obviously, yes. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, I mean, I feel like I'm just saying the same things over and over again. But I'm really happy that it's not. But I am really happy that I read this series. I kind of wish that I had been reading it around the time it came out, because I imagine, just based on like the Goodreads reviews, because I use Goodreads to track what I'm reading, and so I'll see what books get, just based on like the number and passion of the Goodreads reviews. I do kind of wish that I had been around, like reading it around the time, because I'm sure that the community was absolutely rabid for these books.
I think they still are.
I imagine they probably still are, but you know, during when it was coming out, the hype must have been very fun to be a part of. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I don't know how much more I can say without spoilers. But if you're here and haven't read these books, this is book 8. What are you doing? So, anything else you want to say before we jump into some more specific?
No, let's go.
Okay, great. So, going forward, spoilers, obviously. If you have not read this book, go read it, come back. We'll still be here. And if you want to see any of the other videos that we have made on the Throne of Glass books, which we have all of them now, which is so crazy,
a whole series.
you can find a link to the playlist either above my head or in the description down below. But otherwise... Spoilers, I guess. I think everyone should get comfy for what I anticipate is going to be a pretty long video.
I mean, there's a lot that happens.
Because there is, count them, 121 chapters in this book, not counting, I think, an epilogue, as well as 2, like, pre-things, which I actually really liked. Oh, I guess I'll start at the very beginning. We had 2 very short, prologue chapters. They're not even, like, really big chapters, where it's clearly from the perspective of Aelin and Rowan, but they don't say their names. But I just thought it was a really nice, like, intro. I'm like, it's not something she's ever done before, and it's kind of over the top. Yeah. And I was just like, yeah, that feels appropriate for the last book in the series. I kind of like it. We're just like, this is where they are. Rowan is, like, losing his mind. Aelin is also, but because she's being tortured. And it's just, it was like, this is the setup. Here is where we are. Let's go. Yeah. And it felt really nice. Yeah. And speaking of the beginning, I went a little too long between reading the last book and this one. And I think it's less than that. I think because of the fact that Tower of Dawn was the one before this, I one of my first notes is, it's been too long and I don't remember some of this stuff. But I will give Sarah J. Maas credit. And I'm actually interested to see if you remember this or how you felt about it. The first, 10 chapters of this book cover all the different plot lines and include, probably more reminders of what happened than is strictly necessary. Sure. And for me, that was super helpful. Yeah. If I had been reading all of these books in a single month, I may have found it annoying because I would have already known everything and been like, why? Yeah. This book is already super long and has too many chapters. This doesn't need to be here. But I really liked it because I was just, I had read, since Empire of Storms, which is the one before Tower of Dawn, correct? I've probably read 16 books. So sure. I was like, I barely remember what's going on with some of these characters. So I really appreciated that. Is that something you remember experiencing, or just kind of, I don't know if that's something anyone really notice?
No, but I also, I'm kind of used to that. I feel like that definitely is something that happens in the books that I read quite often, of those, little reminders, which, as someone who forgets things a lot, I always appreciate. And I think in this series, it was, for me, I was just thirsty for anything. So, even going over plot lines again, or, I'm like, okay, got everyone, you're here, great.
Yeah. No.
Now, and then it's, kind of a soft entrance, too, where you can then be like,
it is. Actually, it lets us kind of, have a ramp in.
Yeah, for sure.
So I really appreciated that. I'm personally of the opinion that, because I know some books do this, all books need to have, start having summaries, either 100%. At the end or the beginning.
Well, I mean, we do with TV shows of, last season.
Yes, exactly.
Please
that's
give me that.
Yeah, that's what I want in every...
Remember this character's name, because they're going to come back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, that is an entirely separate video.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, and so then once we really ramp up, we are off to the races. I don't even know how to begin to approach this video because of how many different things happen. Because I feel like what we normally do is go through character by character, but too much happens.
Yeah, and I think
in certain parts, especially at least with Aelin and Rowan.
Start at the beginning. Start with Aelin, or because
I
mean, I think that's a major focus of the beginning of the book is Aelin in captivity and her. Character growth within that, her, finding the well of her power and finding a place within herself and her little buddy.
And her little buddy Fenris, yes, who had a very tumultuous journey over the course of this book.
That whole thing, I remember reading that, like, first with their, like, blink language. I was like, oh my god, rip my heart out. Just rip it out.
Yeah.
Because we barely know Fenris at this point. Like, I mean, not, like, deeply know this character. And to, like, see this beautiful bit of humanity of him in support of this, like, you know, this relationship that it's like, we're both in this horrendous situation. How can we figure out this very minuscule way to support each other that is just
I thought it was such an you know, unfortunately, I guess it depends on your opinion and what you like to read. I've read a lot of different physical, psychological, and sexual torture scenes in books. And I thought this one was done very interestingly because I think a lot of the impact of it was saved until the very end when they realized that her skin had entirely been, like, regrown, which kind of, like, takes away parts of her identity. Yeah. Which I thought was very interesting. I didn't think any of this stuff, any of the descriptions or anything like that were too obscenely graphic. For me, I didn't think it was too bad. I thought it managed to get the point across without having to, you know, flagellate the reader.
Yeah, I agree.
Which I really kind of appreciated.
Because it was definitely intense, but it didn't go too far to a point where you're like, I just don't know.
Yes, exactly.
I get it. Like, I get it.
I understand. I understand the point you're trying to make. I don't need.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
I appreciated that. I thought it was relatively well done. But I did think the most interesting part of the whole thing was how it kind of saved it to the end that all of her scars had been taken away, and so it, you know,
because they would heal her and put her back in, and her, you know, her sense of reality was
exactly
all off.
Yeah, and
I think would be probably the most worst.
Yeah, most worst. I think that's a very interesting way and unique way. I think, at least based on what I've read in my reading experiences, of getting into the psychological damage as well, because obviously that's a part of it. Even if you're just being physically tortured, that's a part of it. But having them kind of take away your identity in a way is always going to be part of it. By
having gaslight you too.
Yeah, having them do it, like, there be a very obvious thing of evidence of the mental effect of their torturing. I thought was very interesting. A very interesting route to go, which I really enjoyed is the wrong word, but I get you.
Well, I mean, I think it's, like, consistently to me making Maeve such an interesting villain because there's so much twistedness in her.
Well, and we finally get more of her just talking about, like, why, instead of just like, because the last book which is and I was happy about it, and I wrote it down in my notes about how happy I was that we finally got Maeve to, like, monologue more, and because the first, when she captures Aelin, and I know I talked about this in the Empire Storms video, I was so annoyed that we finally got a villain monologue from her, and she still revealed nothing of her intentions. And then we get more in Tower of Dawn, where they're like, she's a Valg and all that stuff, but we still don't know. But basically, they're just like, I don't know, she didn't want to hang out with her husband anymore, so she just left. And I was like, this still sucks. Like, I mean, I'm glad you give me some information, but so she just decided to bounce, and now, like, she's the reason literally everything is happening? Okay, I guess. But now, we finally get her to talk about it. And she does this with Dorian as well. And don't worry, we're going to talk about them too. But, because I'm sure there's some fanfics out there about that.
It's gotta be.
She talks about how, like, horrible it is there. And whether or not she's telling the truth is obviously a part of supposed to be the mystery that we, the reader, don't necessarily know. But, you know, she does have some pretty consistent stories about how, like, my entire world is this horrible darkness, and, like, I hated every waking moment. I needed to flee. I needed to escape. She's obviously, yes, a monster, and I'm sure, obviously, parts of that are true, not very unreliable source, but it was still good to get some kind of motivation.
No, I agree. I mean, and that's I've always said that of, like, I want to know a villain. Like, I want to see their motivation. I want to, like, get in there and be able to, I guess, understand it in a way, which I think makes it, I don't know, scarier. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I really liked it. And also, I mean, you can tell this book was not written by a man because there's no sexual aspect to the torture, which, big fan of. Just really not, I don't need it in every book I ever read in this genre. So it's
and the men always take the birth control. In every female written.
Don't they
like,
both in this
Fae
one?
book. I don't remember.
I don't remember exactly.
Literally in like every other one, it's always guys.
Yeah, sure. Awesome.
Like, we've done this enough. You go.
So I wasn't super worried about it because that's not the vibe. No. I was just like, I would be really shocked if we got into that. But so I'm glad we didn't. I don't think it was necessary for the story or the character in any way. But I did, think it was interesting that they didn't really focus on the fire stuff until the end. Which the first time I think they brought it up was right before she got rescued. When Maeve is away trying to find the collar that Rowan and them lied about. Anyway. And it becomes a very big plot point later in the book, but it's not really talked about at all until that last bit where she suddenly completely freaks out about it and almost breaks because she's like, I'm afraid they're going to, take my fire away from me, essentially, and turn it into something that's beautiful, into something, well, powerful at least, into something that I hate and can't stand. And that's kind of a plot point that I guess other people misunderstand towards the end of the book, but they talk about it as if it's happened multiple times, but I don't remember it ever happening, so I was just kind of confused about that part, to be completely honest. I mean, it sounded really bad, and I thought that was a very interesting idea for them to go down, but it was. I thought that entire bit was a little bit confusing because it was mentioned once before she escapes, and then mentioned a bunch over the rest of the course of the book, even though the way that she was reacting was like it was the first time it could have ever happened. And Fenris then said, they did burn her. So I'm like, okay. But I guess her, she's the POV and maybe unreliable narrator. Who knows?
Well, and also I think she's always kind of keeping so much of her journey to herself. So
that's true.
That could be part of it too.
Yeah. But I guess since we're there, I did really enjoy her escape. I thought that the way that it was structured was thrilling. Yeah. I thought that Sarah J. Maas really played into...
This book has so many moments where you're like...
Yes. I will say that for the 121 chapter... because this book was...
Just the yuck.
800 or 900 pages long and 121 chapters. I'm reading a 1,000-page book right now that only has 43 chapters.
That's hard.
So...
You gotta have breaks.
So Sarah J. Maas likes a short chapter. Sometimes that's kind of annoying. In the case of these really high-stakes situations where there are a ton of different POVs going back and forth, it's amazing and it rocks and it's thrilling. I'm sorry, am I boring?
No, I'm tired. I love you. You can never bore me.
It's thrilling and she takes full advantage of it.
Oh,
and I really appreciated it here. When we're getting the different perspectives of Rowan and Gabrielle and Lorcan and and Alide and everyone trying to figure out what's going on. I know it's not supposed to be funny, but it made me laugh, and in a good way. I really enjoyed it, because it's just like, oh my god, what else could go wrong? She escapes and starts running in the wrong direction when Rowan is going to save her. I loved that. I thought it was so... I was like obviously I know she's going to get saved, so I'm not really worried about that part, but I was just like, oh no! I really enjoyed that entire sequence. I thought it was thrilling. Really, just 100% thrilling, and I think it was a very good taste of what basically the last third of the book was really going to be back to back, which I really enjoyed, because it, a lot of that, bouncing around chapter-wise happens, especially during the siege at the end of the book. So it was a fun kind of, not really foreshadowing, but just a taste of what you're going to get for the rest of the book. I guess there's only one other part about Aelin's captivity that I really want to touch on, and it's poor Fenris. Poor Fenris really goes through it in this, but he watches his twin brother be forced to kill himself, and then is forced to have sex with Maeve, while his dead body is there on the floor, maybe in his blood. Who knows? They're kind of descriptive.
It's weird.
Yeah, it's bad. It's very bad.
It's all weird.
But there are just some logical things that I don't really get there. One, I mean, I understand that Maeve is Valg and maybe feeds on people's negative emotions. They don't actually really cover that. They say all the other Valg do, but she never, whatever.
Yeah. So I get, maybe it's just
but it's just I don't understand, what does she gain from, there's one who's just entirely enthralled to her, his twin brother. What does she gain from killing him just to punish Fenris? I
think that's it. Period. I think it's punishment.
Yes, but she loses one she doesn't need to punish.
But I also don't think she cares. I think it's just to show that she doesn't care.
I guess. I just, it seems, I don't know, it just didn't really make sense to me. And, but the thing that really bothered me was that I'm a twin. And his twin brother kills himself in front of him. And he's just really sad. And of course he's very sad. But he's just like, he's still just really sad. And then Aylin's life gets threatened. And she's like maybe gonna get tortured more bad than usual. Mm-hmm. And that's when he decides to break the blood oath. And I was just like...
Not the twin. Yeah, that is it, yeah.
I just was like, no. Yeah. Like, I understand what you're doing and why, but no. No. Yeah. I don't buy it.
You'd like break the blood oath for your twin?
Yes. And I also think that Fenris would. Fenris barely knows Aylin.
Yeah, no, I know.
They talk so much. He barely knows her. He's known her for a few months. And he talks so much about his twin brother. Like, it doesn't...
That's a fair point. That's a very fair point.
Yeah, so that was just one of those things that I was just like, okay, I just need to kind of get over that.
Maybe that was like the thing that pushed him to the breaking point.
Yeah, no, to me the only way that it logically makes sense is like it was so horrific that it just like desensitized me. He's in shock.
He's just like,
and that's really the only thing that to me makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, otherwise that whole sequence, phenomenal, you know. I feel like that's almost like an extended prologue.
Yeah, definitely.
Because then everything else is kind of like everyone's on kind of like a similar trajectory for the course
just in different places. Yeah,
Aylin's plot line is so different from getting tortured and until like then after that everything is towards getting to Orinth in Terrasen. Mm-hmm. So I feel like now we can kind of go on to like a normal thing now that I've spent 20 minutes talking about like the first 20 chapters.
I mean, it's
of
epic.
The book.
I mean, there's so much that happens, like you said, within that like really fast time period.
Okay, so who do we want to start with now that everyone's kind of like who do I want to go with?
I don't know. Do you want to continue talking about Aylin, or do you want to skip over to?
I feel like we should talk about Aylin and Rowan. Mm-hmm. Last, just because, or at least Aylin last, because that just feels appropriate. I don't want to like, keep talking about Aylin and then just not talk about her for the last 40 minutes of this video.
Pick another one.
Who? I guess Adian and Lysandra. Yeah, we can talk about. I guess we'll do the couples again. That works.
Yeah,
we can do the couples again for the most part. That's okay. And their plot line going into this was probably one of the ones I was most interested to read because of just the entire setup of Lysandra pretending to be Aylin, and Adian obviously being pissed off. And unfortunately, it was probably my least favorite in the book.
Yeah.
I just had a huge host of problems with this entire one. I mean, there were some great things that happened, and a lot of like they're the ones who like run into like Nox coming back from book 1. Of course, has been a rebel the whole time. Why not?
Yeah, cool.
And Evangeline and Darrow's plot line, while I hated the beginning, actively hated, which I guess I'll talk about in a second, I loved the ending where she becomes like his heir and softens his old man.
He's like a crabby little man.
He's a crabby old man.
A cute little nugget.
And so there were some very good and of course. I think it was Adian, who was like, man, if only we could find the Wolf Tribe and the Lost Fae of Terrasen, but they'll never show up.
Watch out.
Like,
Watch out what you wish for.
It is book 8, Sarah J. Maas. How dare you continue to do this? I thought
She's
it was...
like, you thought you knew everything? Watch out.
Well, I was just like, okay, cool, great, they're going to show up at some point, fine. Yeah, cool. I just thought that was so funny. It's like, she can't help herself from being like, no, there's got to be someone else who's going to like pop up because
you got to get the Avengers.
In a million years. Yeah, it was just, you're going to get portals for characters that you didn't know existed until 100 pages ago. And you're going to be like, what? Amazing.
Thrilled.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, their plotline was unfortunately my least favorite. I mean, it did suffer a little bit because of the fact that it's kind of one note. They are, all the other storylines, like, people are moving around doing different things. Specifically, as I said, Aylin, where she's just, like, captured and being tortured in the beginning, and then but they're just basically dealing with a siege the whole time. And that can be really interesting. I found it to be a little one note in this book, unfortunately, but, not without its host of epic moments and tragic moments.
I think
as well.
Also, like, having read the whole book, and I don't know if you felt this way too, because I felt the same way. It was like anytime we would skip to that POV. I'm like, oh my god, because it's exhausting, which I think is the point.
Which is the point.
You know,
it really wears you
because
down.
it really like you get to the point finally, like at the end, and the few epic battles that they do have, where you're like, it's such a relief because you've just been slogging with them for so long, and it's similar where it's just like one bad thing after another. They're just getting their butts kicked so hard, and it's like exhausting to read, but I think that's the point, there's like a payoff for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree, but it is still not fun. And that's not even the reason it's my least favorite. The reason it's my least favorite is just the way that their relationship plays out. I think it's kind of poorly handled. I understand. Bickery. They're very bickery, and look, there's nothing wrong with that, and that can be very interesting. I honestly think it would have been a more interesting story if they had not ended up together. I actually think that would have been much more interesting because, and I've talked about this in previous videos, but I'm going to talk about it again because it really pissed me off in this book too. Adian is the only character in this whole series that I can remember who actually ever calls Aelin out on the fact that, like, her refusing to tell people that about her plans and all the things she's going to do, which she does again in this book at the very end with, like, Irene and Erwin. And I'm like, this doesn't even make sense. You're just hoping people will do stuff without giving them any reason to do so. But he's the only one who ever points out, like, not only is that dumb, you're actively costing a bunch of people their lives. And also, her plan with Lysandra isn't a plan. There's no plan like that. I know that the aphorism is no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, but this plan obviously won't, because you're supposed to be like a god, and this person can just look like you. Yeah. And their whole storyline is about trying to keep up that charade as long as they can. Anyway, the thing that really bothered me is they're fighting the whole time, and then the way Sarah J. Maas writes Adian when he decides to actually call the only person there available out on this, Lysandra, is very bad and abusive, and he leaves her out in the snow, and it's all really terrible. He's an absolute dick, and it's awful, and of course that's inexcusable and terrible. But then she goes out of her way to, like, have his POV and be like, oh, I didn't even, I wish I hadn't said those things, I know they weren't true and stuff. And you could just be thinking, like, yeah, that's her just writing in the POV and he's feeling regret and stuff. That doesn't mean he actually means it. But the way that she writes it shows that the author, at least in my opinion, clearly thinks that you are supposed to believe that too. And it's crap to me. It's just, she takes the only character who ever actually stands up to the main protagonist, and then paints them in this ridiculous, abusive light to make you as the reader think that they're wrong. And they're not. The way that he communicated it is obviously terrible, but the points that he made are all correct, and it really bothers me that the only time we get that agency as a reader, the author tries to take it away from us. Other than that, the storyline is a lot of that. It's just like them yelling at each other and Adian being really, really crappy to Lysandra, which is terrible. Yeah, so it's really rough. So it wasn't my favorite. I mean, I'm glad they got their happy ending, though I do think it would have been more interesting if Adian was just like, I can't...
Or Lysandra, too. Like,
Lysandra, too.
Either of them
because
are like,
multiple times over the course of this book, I think specifically with Adian and Elide, the only reason they kind of, like, forgive their potential significant other's transgressions, whatever they may be, are because they're about to die. It happens at least twice in this book, maybe more. And I'm just like, that's not okay. Like, fine. I think it actually happens to both Adian and Lysandra. And it's just like, okay, whatever.
That's love, baby.
It's love. But, I mean, there are some amazing moments when Lysandra is underneath the ice.
Oh, she's
and she's the dragon, the sea
dragon.
I
also think, like, especially, like you said, the way that Adian is, like, painted. I love Lysandra. She's one of my favorite characters. And, like, I don't see you two together. Like, I don't feel like these personalities are meant. So, like, they were just one of the relationships that I just wasn't. I was like, I loved that we got a love interest for the two of them, because I like the characters, and especially for Lysandra, but I was just like, nah, I would pick someone else.
Yeah, I think it would have been more interesting if they hadn't gotten together for some reason, and also if Sarah J. Maas had finally allowed someone to have, like, a bad breakup that then didn't get a happy ending. because she never did. And I understand that this is like a romantasy thing, and so that usually isn't the case. But like having two people, every single relationship that's ended in this series, the other person has not only like forgiven whoever the person who ended the relationship was, but ended up with another person. Yeah, both of them have. And also, there was a healthy heaping of tragedy in this entire storyline with Aideen finally reuniting with Gavriel, the father figure that he never had, and then him immediately dying, which I was super bummed about.
Poor Aideen, honestly, he has a rough go this book.
He does. He really does. He has
trying to lead
lead everything, and no thanks to, I guess we can talk about this now, Darrow. Who was a caricature of a character that didn't need to be, with just like a little bit of care and extra writing. I feel like, as someone who's not a writer, so take nothing I say seriously, but like with just a little bit of extra concentration, I do feel like Darrow could have been an actual really interesting character, as opposed to just
a one-note
cranky old man who you are supposed to hate. Yeah. And it really bothered me because about 2/3 the way through the book, or whenever it is that it happens, and he meets up with Evangeline, we're kind of reminded that he was the partner of one of the kings of Terrasen, whose name is escaping me right now. And I was like, oh yeah, like you're actually an interesting character with an interesting story. I'm sorry I forgot about that, because all you've done since you've arrived is just be like, meh. and also... And this was the thing that really bothered me. Incompetent. If he was like at least good at his job, then I'd be like, cool, great, this is interesting. But Sergio Maas just kept doing stuff to make us hate him, which felt kind of sloppy. Like there was specifically a point early on when Aideen and the armies that they have assembled win a battle, win a skirmish, and then go back, and he orders them to come back and meet with him. And then is intransigent and is just angry and mean to everyone that shows up. All of the allies that Aelin has brought together, and then says, I wrote it down, but he literally says like, well, this is what's going to happen, and to all of the other allied armies, you don't have to stay if that's not okay with you. And then all of them like kind of are like, no, we're gonna stay. And I was like, if at that moment my two thoughts were, one, okay, that doesn't make any sense. So obviously, one, he's either made a deal with Erewhon, which is actually super interesting, and I would totally be down for that plotline. Or two, it's just sloppy writing to make us hate him more, because it doesn't make any sense. They all know they're going to die. He told Aelin to go get a bunch of armies, and now he's telling them to just leave if they don't like it. I just was like, this doesn't... You can't convince me that crabby old man pride would allow him to say that, because his entire character is built around the idea that he is supposed to be protecting Terrasen. And that completely flies in the face of it, even if he doesn't mean it. And then they leave him and the rest of the Lords of Terrasen behind by like drugging their soup. And I was just like, they don't need to be super incompetent for it. You literally didn't even need him to show up early in this book. We'd all remember, oh, this guy, he sucks. And it just felt like a bunch of pages were taken up with making him be like a mustache-twirling idiot of a villain. And then at the end, like Evangeline, and I was like, this is an interesting character. This is an objectively interesting character that you created, that you then decided you didn't need to, that the idea of him was enough, as opposed to just building him out a little bit. Sorry, I'm ranting.
But no, you're getting... Well, you know what's so funny is I don't care at all about that plot.
Exactly.
I know. And I also think I'm thinking about it now as the standpoint of a woman. I think he plays a caricature of a mansplaining, crabby man.
Sure.
And so in a woman-led, woman-written book, it makes sense that you are going to have this not interesting, just bad guy. Bad guy. Just straight up bad guy. Because it is a metaphor of you want to get anything done in this world. This female leader wants to get anything done in this world. This is what she has to face.
Yes, and that's totally 100% true. But I think he could have been made an interesting character instead of
really
just
hard into it. No, I agree with you. I think he could have been an interesting character. It's just so funny that you have so many thoughts on this when I literally wouldn't have even talked about him.
And I think this is also important to note because I've spent, I think, looking at the timer, 6 whole minutes talking about this now, or I don't know how long, but I spent a few solid minutes ranting about this. It's very important to note that, I feel like anytime I voice a criticism, you're like, oh no, he hates the book. I still really, really enjoy this book. I can hate something about this book enough to make me rant about it and still be like, the sum of the parts is much...
Yeah, for sure. No, for sure.
It's much bigger than...
I just think it's funny, too, because, like, I just don't even care about it. I don't even care about it.
Well, I'm doing it for the internet. They like people seeing get pissed off, right?
I just think you're like, it's so funny that like this is like a moment, like a thing that you
we also
like
focus on different things.
And I truly, well, that's
which is
the
the whole point.
Like, had I been doing that, I wouldn't have even talked about him. Honestly, I don't think I would have.
And I know that I just wasted a ton of time in an already long video talking about such a minor plot character,
who read this book,
and I'm gonna like not at all talk about, like, spoiler alert, I'm not at all gonna talk about what's her name from The Wastes.
Oh, love her.
Yeah, she's great. She's fine. I have nothing to say about her. She did a nice job.
How dare you?
What's her name?
Robin.
Nope, not at all.
No, I can't.
Ansel.
I was so close.
No, you were not. What are you doing with R? Anyway,
I don't know.
It's like Ansel of Briarcliff and the leader of the Silent Assassins, as well as Rowan's cousins and stuff, all play a very interesting part in this book. None of them are things that I was just like, okay, cool. I mean, like, it was really tragic when Ansel found out that her entire army was murdered. That's rough.
I love Ansel.
But she's great. I think she's a great character. I think but nothing that any of those characters did, I was like, yeah, I really got it.
No, that's fair.
I
mean, there's so much happening in this book, so like, you have to. There are going to be some things that are not going to stick with you.
Anyway, so that is my whole thing about Darrow, and that's really that's my whole thing. But I'm ending it. Let me talk.
You're still going.
That's my whole thing about Darrow. That was the end of it, and if you hadn't interrupted
you said, and then.
No, I said, and that's my whole thing about Darrow.
And you said something else after that.
And then that's also kind of my end of Lysandra and Adian.
Sure.
If you would just let me finish my sentence.
So sorry.
This is chaotic. I apologize.
Weird.
But yeah, that's kind of the, Lysandra and Adian, once they've got together, and I'm like, okay, I guess I have to get on board with this. It's, it's fun, it's sexy. She's happy.
Just so cool.
I'm happy for both of them. And you know what? I did really enjoy her reunion with Falcon.
Yeah, like Daddy or
her
like
uncle. No, I mean, I know who he is. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce his name.
No, me neither.
But I thought he was an interesting character. I'm glad he survived. I did think it was really funny that he's like, you can have my entire like merchant empire, and she's like, I'm good.
Yeah.
But I really love her relationship with Evangeline, and her reunion. I very much enjoyed, and really, I thought it was a good touch to have her have some kind of family, be specific, like blood family, because her entire character is kind of wrapped around as a shapeshifter, not having her own identity and not even knowing what her identity is because she can't find her own face anymore. She doesn't remember what it looks like, and allowing her to have some tie to find some form of identity from who she was and who she is becoming, which is the Lady of Cavriel or whatever she's going to be, as well as Adian's betrothed wife, woman, was, I thought, a nice touch, just to have like that come kind of full circle to, as she's found her own identity outside of what her family was, that part of who she is comes in again, which was a very nice and touching reunion as well. But that's, so not probably my least favorite of the storylines in this book, just because of the entire relationship aspect of it and Darrow. But otherwise, I guess we'll go over to maybe my other least favorite relationship one was, which also has to do with, I'm going to decide to be with you again when you're almost about to die, which is Elide and Lorcan. Though I did love the scene where she, came back and decided she was going to be with him and like rode out to him. I loved that. That was scene, a great scene. Chills.
I think about that scene honestly all the time.
So good.
I remember reading it and literally like I was on a plane reading it and the guy next to me, Shirley, I was truly going like fully. I couldn't. I was like sweating. I started sobbing at the end. Like I just.
You want to know how much I loved it? I loved it even though the entirety of the scene was rendered essentially moot because of the actions that happened right after it.
Yeah,
like, she didn't actually need to ride out and get him. And I was like, I don't even care. That was such a great scene.
It was unreal. The way that was written was. Like I said, I truly, to this day, it's been 2 years since I read it. I think about that scene probably once a week. Like I think about it all the time.
It's one of the most
and another
epic
one of those
moments.
where you're shifting POVs, and it just was. I had never read. I'm not one for like a battle scene. It's not that I don't like it, but I don't really find them interesting or like exciting to me. I mean, exciting, yes, but like I usually get overwhelmed, and that is to me, my personal world, the best battle scene I've ever read. And I could just like hear the like music, like I could hear the like score with it, because it was just so nonstop, so absolutely epic, so epic.
Yeah, it's great. It's epic. It is epic. No, it's one of my favorite scenes in the whole book. Absolutely.
Oh, good, because it was one of mine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's phenomenal.
I assumed you would like it. That was really one of those ones that I like I said, to me it was the best battle scene I've ever read, and I don't really like battle scenes, and it blew my mind. So to me, I'm like, oh, everyone, this is amazing.
Well, I mean,
you've read a lot more.
I'm not even talking about the I'm not even talking about the siege of Antioch or her.
Sure, no, yeah, you're just talking about
her ride to
which to me
Lorcan,
is honestly sums up most of that battle scene.
Exactly. That's that entire scene, that sequence is phenomenal. Not to say that the siege of Antioch is not good. I did enjoy it, though it is also
it all leads up to that.
Led by another male, which I guess maybe that is the point she's trying to make, and I just need to get over it. But another like useless male character that is just a caricature.
Yes,
an
Robby.
Old man who sucks.
Here you go.
And like that's fine, but those old men who suck can also have like whatever.
No, you don't need
I can't curse.
You don't need him to. I'll tell you that right now.
Anyway, Elyden Lorcan. Yes, so that sequence. Unbelievable. Incredible. Their sex scenes, really liked. And also, this may have been theirs. I'm not sure, but I wrote down one line in the book that it's really... I was just like, no notes. This is phenomenal. Okay, here we go. Possibly my favorite sentence in the book. Definitely my favorite sexual sentence I think I've ever read in a book.
Okay.
The sheer size of him, a decadence she would never be able to get enough of. 100%. No notes. Fantastic. A decadence. Loved it. I think that's Elyden Lorcan. Not sure. I didn't write down who it was.
How did you feel about the ending of their sex scene? Which wasn't... So it ends... This is the line that literally tortures Sarah J. Maas fans. It's where she says, show me everything, and then you just get... And Lorcan did. That's all you get.
You know what? I'm so... His dick. I'm so used to... What do you think he showed her? No, I mean, no.
We don't get actually like them
he showed her
together.
Everything, as in like he showed her all.
Yeah, and so Lorcan did is the end of that like sequence.
I'm remembering that. This is the best thing, because you just talked about something that I ranted about for a really long time that you're like, I would never have noticed. I didn't remember that sentence until you just
don't really
told
read
me.
Sexy books.
I don't read sexy books, and I was like, yeah, great.
Meanwhile, we're all out here like feral for what's happening under the sheets with these two.
I loved that. I loved him. I don't know, I guess, teaching her the ways of pleasure. I think he says something along those lines during the book. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, she's like, absolutely, I'm ready, let's do it.
Decadence.
The decadence, the sheer size of him, a decadence.
Honestly, I love that.
I don't know if it was them again, but I did love that sentence, and that's a vibe for them anyway.
That is a vibe, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I didn't like... how, because it was used multiple times, I didn't love the, he's gonna die. Wait, I can't live without him.
I've got to confess my love.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But that was fine.
Okay.
But I don't remember what else they really did in this book. I mean, Elyden is kind of just, the schemer, and Lorcan's kind of just around killing people.
Just being a little crabby.
I do like the ending bit, where she is kind of part of the destruction of Erewhon. I didn't love the way that plan was set up. Because again, Aelin doesn't tell anyone anything, but I loved that it was a team effort, and I guess I'll talk about that towards the end with probably Irene's storyline. But that I think was one of her other biggest contributions. I gotta see if I wrote any other notes about her, because now I feel lame that I have literally nothing else to say about her.
She doesn't get a lot. She's one of my favorite characters, and she doesn't get a lot. Which is
okay, great. That makes me feel better, because I'm just gonna say, yeah. I loved that section of their storyline. I think it's one of the best parts of the whole book. Other than that, I honestly don't think she got that much, which was a little bit disappointing. Though also understandable, because she's the only normal character amongst
non-magic.
Amongst a bunch of warriors or magic people, and so it's understandable that she has a little bit less going on in this book, though not any less disappointing. But I am glad that she had her hands in that plot at the very end, the plan to defeat Erewhon and stuff like that. And I really liked her relationship with Irene.
Yeah.
I loved
they make sense together.
They make a lot of sense together. Really do. I like that they mentioned, like, hey, I might be able to heal your foot. It'll be really painful and take a very long time, and I'll have to re-break it. But I really liked that we got that kind of...
human to human.
Yeah, human interaction and just a little bit of a glimpse of her future before she ends up going to take over her own Parenth and take over her own land that was overrun in the beginning. So see how far she has come. Yeah, I really liked her and Lorcan, other than kind of the way they got back together, but unfortunately just not a ton happened with her. I mean, I liked the whole cadre in this book, but
we got a lot more of them in this book.
We got a lot more of them in this book, and they were all kind of... I thought it was really funny. I thought it was kind of a joke at first that Aelin was going to be like, I'm going to collect them all and like get all of Maeve's little boys. But then she really started doing it, and I was like, oh, okay. That's not weird at all. But yeah, I guess since I don't have too much more to say, unfortunately, about Elide and Lorcan, we can move on to Irene and Chaol.
Chaoly baby.
Oh, baby. I liked their plot line in this. Baby. I really enjoyed their very too quickly wed life.
Yeah.
The fact that Irene was pregnant, I was like, no, like, the baby.
The baby. Well, and I like that they go straight into, I think with that, like you said, that like too quick to wed, they go straight into like this beautiful teamwork.
Yes.
Which I think is really lovely.
That is the one thing I loved about their relationship. They had no problems throughout the course of the book. I was like, dope. I don't have to worry about that. Yes, exactly. They were,
I care about you.
I care about you. You care about me. Yeah, we're going to make it work together. Great co-parenting. Like, that made me very happy. I was like, I don't need every relationship to have dramatic ups and downs. They just really want to bone, and they're very happy that they're married, and now Irene's pregnant.
Yeah, and then they have to support one another.
Yes,
with how everything goes with Chaol's healing and
exactly, and the fact that she's now been brought back to her homeland where she doesn't actually know anyone, and he is going back to his home where he needs a lot of support. And her showdown with his dad was great, awesome. I loved that, which it served Chaol's dad just being a dick. It's really good, and she was a dick right back, and I really enjoyed it.
Powerful woman.
But her, I mean, obviously the most... It was really interesting watching her deal with the realities of war, which is not something that we really got in this book, and not something a lot of other characters had really seen either. But it was really nice to have her POV for us as the reader to be like... It would be kind of hard for every single POV character to be like, I am really being inundated and kind of paralyzed by the graphic realities of what's going on around me, which would make sense for most of them, except for kind of the cadre, who have actually been in war before.
Yeah.
But the rest of them are like 20-somethings who have never really been in an actual fight.
Right.
Or actual like large-scale battle. And so it would make sense, other than Adian, it would make sense that all of them would kind of be paralyzed. Especially Chaol, who was like so bummed just a few months ago that he made his first kill, even though I still hold that makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
But so it was nice to have Irene's POV to be like someone who is struggling with the amount of death and trauma that is going on around them, because she is kind of the antithesis of that. So it's nice to get her POV and allow us as the reader to experience that, as opposed to everyone just being like, nah, I'm too cool and powerful to care about the fact that I'm like swimming in gore right now.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed getting her perspective on all of that, and allowed her tie with the royals of the Cognate, who didn't play a huge role in this, and poor Nesrin. Man, I feel bad for that character. She did her so dirty. She literally just didn't have a role in this book, and I don't have a single note about her in this, and it didn't really occur to me till the end. And I was like, that sucks, man. Because she came in Empire Storms, and I was like, this is a cool new character. And then in Tower of Dawn, she was like immediately written off. And then in this one, it's just like, okay, fine. Yeah. So that I thought that was a really big bummer. Nothing that happened in her storyline particularly bothered me or offended me, but nothing in her storyline mattered. Except for, I think she was part of the group that's like, they're going to break the dam, which wasn't a huge surprise because they had mentioned it earlier. But yeah, so that kind of sucked. But it was nice that her tie to the royals and everything like that remained, and so we did get to see them a little bit. Not that they did a ton either, which was a bummer. The Rucks were very cool, and getting to fight the witches and all that stuff was great, but they didn't have like other than the fact that they had an army, which immediately kind of became Aelin and Chaol's and everyone else's army. They didn't have too much of an impact, which was a bit of a bummer. Still, it was fun to get to read, to see them and talk to them every once in a while. Mm-hmm. But what I really loved about Irene's storyline was the fact that, as we kind of knew, she was the one who took down Erewhon.
Of course she is.
Yeah, of course she was. It was great. She's like crazy powerful, and everyone like recognizes it, which I thought was good.
Yes. Yes.
Because and even with her god gone, which was kind of a question mark, like what's going to happen. And it was also fun to have her perspective of being basically the only person in the whole series who's like, wait, you're going to get rid of the gods? I don't like that.
Yeah.
Everyone else is like, yeah, get them out of here, they suck. Which everyone else is probably more right. But I did enjoy that we got, because Lorcan clearly didn't care. Lorcan and Alide both were maybe had 2 sentences being like, well, I don't feel that touch on my shoulder anymore, but Lorcan I think specifically says I haven't felt it in a while, who cares? It's like,
yeah, okay,
right. But yeah, so I really loved just the entire way that taking down Erewhon went, and the fact that, it lived up to what the expectations were, that she was just
powerful,
light, essentially, and goodness, and that's kind of, on the nose, but sometimes at the end of a book where you're fighting just an unnameable darkness and evil, that's what you want.
Absolutely.
And the fact that she didn't do it alone, that there was a lot of different people there in this entire scheme to bring him down. And especially the fact that Alide kind of orchestrated it, and Aelin was like, I hope she does this, which trying to give Aelin credit for this somehow, even though she had nothing to do with the plan. Okay. But she, so I really enjoyed that. And Chaol, Chaol's just Chaol. He finally, I feel got back to being the Chaol that I knew and loved in the beginning of the series in this. He, finally has, accepted himself for who he is, accepted the injury.
He's got a hot wife.
He's got a super hot wife. She's pregnant.
He's feeling great.
He's feeling great. His dad is still a dick, but he now outranks him as Hand of the King, which was really funny. Yeah, he also is like, yeah, sure, the mountain men, absolutely, take some of our land to help us, please. My dad's an idiot.
Yeah,
really great. I did, of course, shed a tear when him and Dorian reunited. I'm not an unfeeling monster. Yeah, it was beautiful. I don't know, did Chaol do anything else particularly?
I don't think so.
I think that Chaol and Irene...
He just fights.
He just fights, which is great. He defends his home. He convinces the army to go after, Aniel or whatever, which is great. I don't think Chaol does too much, but it's still one of my favorite characters in the book, just because I'm finally it's Chaol, from book 1 again. Yeah. He's happy and not depressed, and he's in love, and he's finally fighting, even though that was something he was supposed to be doing the whole time. And yeah, their entire storyline and everything about them just made me smile.
Yeah.
And I was really happy.
Oh.
And I really liked the last bit at the end, where Aelin, Dorian, and Chaol are together, and I'm like, oh.
I know, that's
I was like, we've been through so much, they were just kids. Oh wait, no, it was a year ago. And actually, specifically, I do believe it was during Chaol's storyline where, Yulmus, which I'm assuming is Christmas, got mentioned 2 or 3 times in pretty quick succession, and he was like, man, it's been a crazy year. And I was like,
oh, year?
Right, yeah. It's like saying, man, junior year's been wild. It's just yeah, okay, it's sure. But yeah, their entire storyline just made me super happy.
Yeah. Love it.
And I guess let's go to the sexy storyline now, sexier storyline with Dorian and Manon and Maeve?
Yeah.
Question mark.
Our addition?
What? And also the spider? Dorian's new plan. It seems anytime he runs into a new living being is oh man, how am I getting out of this? I know, I will seduce them. Let's go. And he just immediately starts trying to screw everything.
Dorian.
It's really funny to me. And
I also just imagine him kind of giving you a Batman voice,
absolutely. Yeah, I love it. I think it's great. I think it's very appropriate that Dorian specifically doesn't get a romantic partner at the end, like a long-term one. I think that him and Manon's thing is weird, and Manon is bi, at least.
Well, yeah,
and Dorian probably is too.
Yeah, and Dorian's just sexy.
Dorian's just hot.
Kind of sexy.
I like that Adian is openly bi.
Yeah.
Which they mentioned once, and then, like, kind of mentioned again in this book, because Lissandra's like, oh no, is he going to sleep with, like, his male friend in the army? And I was like, oh right, that's dope. Yeah, man, but specifically what really got me, and I wrote this down in the notes, was like, oh no, Maeve stepped on Mouse Dorian. That is absolutely some sort of weird erotic fanfiction out there.
Probably.
You know what I didn't need? And they could have done it in a different way, and it would have been totally fine, but it was a little weird the way they chose to do it. When Dorian is, like, really working on his shapeshifting, and becomes, like, an underage girl.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if she was, but I think she was. And it's still a weird thing, but I think it introduced some much-needed levity to the moment, because everything that had been happening around that time in the book was incredibly intense. But then there was some weird, like, kind of sexual stuff that he mentioned, which normally could have been funny, but the fact that it was a minor, I was like, okay, dude, fine. Like, I get it.
Keep it in your pants.
Okay. But anyway, and Manon was pissed about it, understandably so. Anyway.
Anyways, love sexy Dorian.
Dorian's great. Dorian's storyline in this I really, really enjoyed, including the unbelievable reveal that the king never had a name. That blew my mind, and I loved it, because I made jokes about it in the first few books. There's literally a quote in one of our first videos where I'm like, the king who, I don't know his name. I really don't. I still don't know. Clearly should.
Yeah.
I was like, that is insane. That is amazing. If that is something you planned from the beginning, great job.
Yeah.
If that is something you're just like, oh crap, I never gave him a name, unbelievable pivot. Like, it doesn't matter. I was super stoked about it. Dorian's entire storyline kind of leading to his father's lack of identity and realizing that his father's name, eventually getting the name from him, is his father's name was Dorian as well, is just a beautiful full circle moment for him. Dorian's storyline, specifically solo, was one of my favorites. It didn't make a ton of sense at certain times, like, he's like, I understand he's like, I'm gonna go into Morath and I'm gonna get the third word key and figure it out myself, but I'm also gonna bring him with me. Like, I was just like, okay, whatever. But I really loved it, and him working with Aelin to create and close the lock.
I thought that was such a beautiful scene, especially like you said, like having the like 3 OGs together in the beginning, and then Dorian, and then basically being like, it's gotta be us.
Yes.
Like, we are the ones who have to do it.
Yeah, Dorian and Aelin. The vote, I really liked the whole thing. His relationship with Manon is very tumultuous, and I think that that's appropriate for both of them and what both of them are dealing with, especially because both of them are dealing so much with parental issues and their own identities outside of who their parents were.
And what better way to find that than through sexual freedom?
Yeah, sure.
You know?
Why not? And
what a great place for self-discovery.
Yeah. And Manon, who I've loved from, well, I haven't loved from the beginning, because I was like,
intrigued
I know that you're going to be good, let's just get there. But I've loved the witches from the beginning. That's probably my favorite part of Sarah J. Maas's world building. Why? Who knows? I just really like them.
Yeah, I like
them
too.
I think that...
Well, because I feel like they're interesting. They're a little dark, but they're also good, which I think just shows that, like, there's not black and white, there's not good and bad.
Yeah. I really love how much of the witches we got in this book. Not just with her traveling with Dorian, but also, like, Manon trying to rally the Cochrans around her, and then her fighting all 3 of the matrons at once, which I really liked the scene. Makes 0 sense, like literally 0 sense, because no one helps. I was like, why did they come alone? Even if they're like, all witches 100% observe the sanctity of the duel, then it's 3-on-1, which immediately flies in the face of that, and 2 of them run away, so like clearly they don't.
I think that's kind of the point.
That is the point, and I understand that, but I just was like, there's some times where I just can't make the logical leap, But it was still a great scene, and her saying, "That's my crown," was super dope.
Really?
Yeah, chills.
Really amazing.
I thought that her storyline through this was fascinating, as well as her relationship with Dorian and trying to come to terms with that, and because it's something she's never experienced before, something she thought that no one would really no witches really ever experienced. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting when Dorian left to go to Morath, and they had slept together the night before, and she asked him to stay. She allowed herself to be that vulnerable with him. And she thought that him being intimate with her was his nonverbal acceptance. And it just shows how little experience she kind of has with these kind of relationships with anyone. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it was a very interesting take on her. And her storyline really included one of the, if not the most epic moments in the book, which is just like the final flight of the 13.
The 13.
Oh, cool!
Mm-hmm. That's from Spark and Edge. Use my code Liz10.
I
love this picture.
Yeah, it's tragic. Asterin, though, flying topless to kill her grandma was awesome.
Absolutely perfect. So good. So good.
What an image. And her losing her wyvern, too, whose name is escaping me. Abraxas, thank you. And her losing Abraxas, too. She lost everyone. It's so sad. I was
they tell her to live.
They tell her to live, yeah.
Oh, I can't say without crying.
Yeah, really heartbreaking stuff. Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Well, and especially to see these really hardcore characters who don't show a whole lot of emotion, to, like, see especially her 13 of, like, how they have this beautiful familial love.
Yeah.
We'll never forget. No. Ripped my heart out.
Yeah, it really did.
I was reading this being like, surely no. Surely no. Surely no. Surely they're not all gonna die.
I was surprised, but also not entirely. It was beautiful. I thought it was an incredible scene. I mean, I think the witches got multiple unbelievable scenes just in that siege. Like when they fly in and save the city, the first time, there's like 6 times the city is saved from like when Rolf and the Mycenaeans show up, which is great. The witches show up, so there's a bunch of the wolf tribe. There's a whole bunch of moments where the city is saved from near imminent doom. This is one of them, and this is the second of them, because the first time the witches show up, it's another unbelievably epic moment. But yeah, when they fly and destroy that last witch tower, it's appropriate. They're destroying.
Well, and you kind of had said in the one book when they talked about it, you're like, this is going to happen. This is going to be a plot point, where they talked about if they make
yes. Oh, yes.
What do they call it? I don't
the yielding.
The yielding. That's it.
Yeah, the yielding.
They essentially blow up.
Yeah.
And so it's something is going to happen. But to me, I didn't expect it to happen on that scale.
Yeah. It was...
Sobbing. I was sobbing. Sobbing now, I was sobbing then.
Yeah.
This book made me cry so many times.
When they yielded light instead of dark. Yeah. It was... Yeah. Unbelievable moment. I'm bummed that we still never got, a motive for the Blackbeak.
Not the yellow
legs? No, but I love the yellow legs. They're my favorites.
Yeah.
But the Blackbeak matron... The fact that we never really got a motive for her other than, I'm mad. So I was just like, classic. Oh, that's sad. But it's okay. And it's appropriate that Manon's, literally and symbolically, her old life as a Blackbeak goes and literally blows itself up and tells her to live so that she could be queen of the Cochrans. And, all of the Iron Teeth witches are ostensibly dead. So, it's she has a really, really rough go of it, but it's one of my favorite storylines, and I like the fact that at the end she's not going to leave her people to be with Dorian. Dorian's not going to leave his people to be with her, but they're keeping the door open for whatever may happen. Yeah, for sexy times until one of them has to.
Well, I remember reading that, and I agree with you in so many ways of everything gets tied up so perfectly with everyone having a partner, and I love storylines like that because there's so much reality in that. Of you showed me so much, you showed me love, you've opened me up. I love this, but I have a journey and a path that I have to go on.
Yeah.
And if we can do that together, awesome, but we can't. So let's do that, and if we end up back together, great. Yeah. But if not, we need to do these things, and I think that's a beautiful, empowering way forward.
Yeah. Well, especially because so much of Dorian's storyline is about his depression, and we get a little a bit on the nose, but great messaging from Cultane when her ghost shows up. Again, another great cameo. And he's like, how on earth did you fight the demon in the collar? And it boils down to, like, I believe I didn't deserve it. Mm. And so, like, your life is going to meet your expectations for it.
Yeah, love it.
I was like, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, but Dorian finally coming into, like, more full acceptance of, like, I am going to not only survive, but I am going to continue to, I'm going to have to, you know, raise my kingdom up from the ashes. And there are more important things than my feelings for this witch.
Sexy witch, love her.
This sexy witch. But, yeah, I think that's, yeah, man, Rip the 13. It's crazy. Yeah.
I love them.
I know. So did I. Yeah. But I guess that brings us all the way back around.
Here we are, Rowan and
Aelin and Rowan. And, you know how I feel about Aelin's lack of telling people of her plans.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. But her and Rowan getting back together, and then Rowan's, like, gentle bringing her back into bringing her back into the world, but also kind of misunderstanding because he doesn't realize she's just waiting to go Super Saiyan was kind of amusing. But I did love that she literally went Super Saiyan.
She literally
at one point is like, I'm gonna blow everything up.
I'm gonna blow up if you touch me. So
yeah, so I can't. No.
Yeah. But how epic in her release of that.
Yes, and her final. And yeah, I mean, I guess we should talk a lot more, I guess, or not a lot, because it's already been over an hour, but we should talk more about, specifically the way the gods are kind of talked about in this book, because Sarah J. Maas immediately in this book seems to jump on the, like, they're not gods, they're just beings from another world, which I really enjoyed. I thought that was really interesting, and assumed we wouldn't get time to really explore, but we did a little bit, which I liked.
Commentary on power.
Exactly. And also then Adian's got all that, Dorian has that talk with, who's that king? What's his name?
Who's that king?
I don't remember. You guys know who I'm talking about. Yeah, the conversation where he summons the king, and he's like,
Brandon.
Thank you. And he's and Brandon reveals, like, there are other gods. It's complicated, and I was like, this is great. I want to read more about this. Yeah. I know we're not gonna, and that's fine. But I was just like, this is super interesting. And then she and Dorian finally make the lock, and they're in this space, and she pushes Dorian out because, of course, she was going to. We all knew she was going to do that. There's no way she's going to let. There's no way that Aelin's going to let Dorian die. Come on now. And she, like, converses with the gods, and then they kill Mala, which was nuts. And then I do love that she gets the last laugh. Yeah. Wait, was it Mala she killed? No, she kills Alana. Excuse me, I messed up the name.
It's okay. I was like, yeah, sure.
She kills. They kill Alana or Elena or however you say it, and then Mala gives her some power back. And that whole sequence is great, and the fact that they get back to their world is super cool. And then she just,
like, free falls.
Well, and she sicks a bunch of, like, interdimensional beings on them, which is really funny.
Yeah.
And then she free falls through a bunch of different realities, looking for that scent of pine and snow.
Gotta have one.
And gotta have scents of pine and snow.
What's your scent?
B.O.? I don't know. We've been doing this for like an hour and a half now.
B.O.
But what was I saying? Oh, I literally wrote on my notes, I was like, so at least one of these has got to be relevant to the other books, right? I got to assume that the guy with the wings and the pregnant lady probably has something to do with another who gave her, like, the dark power to get through. I'm like, this probably has to do with, I'm going to guess A Court of Thorns and Roses. You heard it here first, folks. I'm guessing A Court of Thorns and Roses, that is somehow a character from it.
Don't say anything in the comments.
But I don't know. Anyway... so that entire sequence was really cool. I will say, in a book that's full of incredibly epic moments, that was a really interesting scene that I know had a huge impact on the plot and everything, but I was just kind of like, okay. Like, none of it was like, my mind is blown.
Yeah, sure.
Which is it feels weird
so
when in any
moments,
yes, exactly. So. In any other book, that would have been like, whoa, this is entirely dynamic changing and everything like that, but I'm I've been reading a whole book of that at that point. And I will also say, again, I'm not going to harp on this, but I do think that the logic of, like, the vote and democracy, and Sarah J. Maas trying to throw in that, like, democracy is, like, the way at the very end of this series, I did think was a little weird. Her being like, Aelin's utopia also includes democracy instead of, like, a monarchy, or at least some form of it. after they've spent so much time talking about the empire that is the Cognate and how great it is, and they continue to talk about that in this, and I'm like, again, empire never equals good, and even if it does, there was a lot of bloodshed to get there. But then she starts being like Aelin and this vote, and that becomes like a weird plot point, and I was like, I mean, okay, whatever. But the idea that they are like, oh, I didn't understand why they did it when they did. It didn't make sense to me at all, and I couldn't like even... I actually like, spent a second being like, I don't understand the arguments that people are making for it. Because they're two living, walking, breathing nukes. And they're about to go into a war where they don't know if they're going to win, even if they have their full power. And their only idea was just like, okay, well, but what if Erewhon, like, attacks one of us and gets the 3 keys? And I'm like, okay, but he could do that at literally any time ever. Dorian hid them behind a rock when he was going to Morat. Like, what? Where was this? So I didn't really understand why they did it then. But again, that didn't really ruin the scene because I was more interested in what was going on anyway. But that's just another like logical caveat that I was like, okay. Most of them I can kind of just be like, oh sure, I guess I can understand like what you're trying to do here. I just like fully didn't understand the argument at that point. But anyway, yeah, so her, that entire story, and then her final showdown with Maeve and Erewhon, which is everything that, it was purported to be from the beginning. Like you had to have this moment. And her, showing down Maeve after Maeve has, like, tortured her. And then Erewhon, and then, of course, using her, like, swagger to just...
Yeah,
like,
that's
her. To convince Aelin that... And she's got a little bit of magic left to, like, enchant her sword. I'm like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, God. Okay. Honestly, if you can, you got it.
I thought they made more of a deal. I thought they made more of a deal of that than they needed to. I was like, okay, okay. There's, like, it can slay Valak still. And I'm like, okay. You could also just like pour oil on it and light it on fire and that would still work.
No, because I'm magic.
But
she's a god.
I just thought that was kind of funny. But in Erewhon, like she like convinces him and I to like fly away and kind of try and deal with Irene, and then Irene absolutely wrecks him, which is great. But I really loved that Fenris got like a final moment and he finally teleported again for the first time since his brother died and gets to stab Maeve right in the face. Yeah, really great. And I thought he killed her. He didn't, which I would have enjoyed more if he had.
Yeah.
But it was still, yeah, I was like, oh yeah, that's dope. And then she was still alive and I was like, okay, fine. But, I thought it was a really great showdown, and that was a wonderful part of the siege sequence where we're moving back and forth between so many different POVs and so many different things are happening.
Yeah.
So anytime we get back to Aelin and she's just like more exhausted and still trying to hold them off was wonderful, I thought. Well, their entire army is back behind them and everything is doomed until we get portals at the end and all those people come on through. But
literally Avengers.
Rowan's plotline in this is so interesting because he's there the whole time, and he, of course, is like pivotal to rescuing Aelin, but most of the time, like when she is around, he doesn't actually do that much when you think about it. I think the most interesting part of his storyline in this is his storyline with the cadre and like how their relationships change because of the person that they are following, how he has to deal with like loss and stuff when Gabriel dies, and working closer with Lorcan even though they weren't on the best of terms, and also just having to deal with the fact that like they're in a new court now and it's different, and
they're really old guys.
They're really old guys. Trying to bring
changes a lot.
Trying to like bring Aelin back to who she was, supporting her even when she says she's not and feels like herself has been stripped away from this torture. And I thought interestingly, like being like, well, Aelin's supposed to be the queen of the West and the East, but she doesn't want that, so my cousin gets it. And I thought his kind of relationship with his cousins, even though they played a decent role in the story, but you never really see him and them talking. So those were the most interesting parts of his story, but he doesn't like actually do too much otherwise. But again, I enjoyed his relationship with Aelin, partially because I didn't need another one that was full of conflict, and I thought it was interesting that like their intimacy obviously struggled, and like them getting their intimacy back over the course of the book while as she recovers and starts returning to herself at least a little bit, and starts realizing she's not gonna die, or that at least she may not want to over the course of the book. adds some texture to their relationship that I enjoyed as well.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, and then one of my favorite parts of the book at the very end, when everyone's finally leaving, except for Rolf, which I thought was such a weird detail to add. She's like, she told everyone they could stay through the winter. Everyone said they'd think about it, and everyone said they were going to leave, except for Rolf. And I was like, okay.
That vibes, that checks, honestly.
Great. How random. But where her, Dorian, and Aelin, Dorian, and Kale are all just like standing around and hugging, and I was like, oh, this is so sweet. And they're like, man, what a wild year, guys. Like, and it's just, it's so interesting because, like I said at the beginning of the video, over an hour ago, if you're still with us, I apologize, I've just been ranting. I started this journey with these books a long time ago, and so it does feel like at the very end, I'm like, wow, I've been on such a journey with these characters. I don't know if I would feel that way if I hadn't started these books a long time ago. I feel like I would have, because so much happens in this book. But the fact that, like, all of this happens over the course of 8 whole books, and in world is only 1 year, is just so crazy. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just does make me giggle, because I'm like, I feel like we've been through so much. These characters have changed so much, and obviously that makes sense. This is a new adult, maybe started as young adult, but as new adult series, and that time of your life you are becoming who you are going to be, and you're making decisions about who you currently are, who you want to be, who the world tells you you're supposed to be. And that's clearly like the theme of the whole series. That's the theme of a lot of young adult series, and it's very obvious when all of the main characters, except for like the 5,000-year-old men who still act like teenagers, but we'll forget about that part, are all changing drastically over the course of this 1 year, which makes sense because that's kind of how life works. So I don't want to say it's lighter than the stuff that I read, because a lot of really heavy stuff happens in these books, but that theme of like finding yourself and coming of age and stuff is lighter, and it makes me feel nostalgic no matter how I read it. And there's a reason that so much of media has that coming of age theme and why those things are so popular, because we all remember that, even if we've moved past it. I am maybe in my mid-30s, but I still remember what that was like, and it's such a beautiful time in your life.
We have other phases of that too. Like, I'm feeling that now in my 30s, you know, of just like discovering who I am now.
Yeah, it's a uniquely human experience that everyone can relate to, and it's such a beautiful, like, little capstone to end it on. And I don't know if that's what the author was going for with that last scene with them, but it's what really drove it home for me. Yeah, and I want to end on that, with that happy note, I think. Yeah, so, do you have any... I've been talking for about 80 minutes.
No,
so is there anything else you want to say?
Love this book.
Yeah, that's good. So what do we want to rate this out of?
Fire.
Fire? I was thinking stags. I don't think we've done that.
Oh, we gotta do a stag.
I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, we gotta do a stag.
Some kind of stag.
Gotta see the stag.
Yeah, so how many stags out of 5 would you give this? I would give this 5 stags out of 5 as well.
Easily 5.
I think partially because I love the last book in a series. I always do. If I've gotten to the end of the series, I like the series, and I really enjoy it. So yeah, it's partially honorary, partially because I just think it's a great book. It's a really great ending to this series. I think that anytime you pick up a book, you need to kind of, or at least in my case, you kind of know what you're getting into most of the time. Unless you're picking up everything you ever read blind, you go in with some kind of expectations. And I think that means that it's really hard to judge different books on the same criteria as others, because you have to kind of meet it where it is. Otherwise, you're going to love some things and absolutely hate others. Like, I really love some denser books, and if I was judging this based on those standards and went in with those expectations, I'd probably really not like this. But I think if you want to be well-read and read a wide variety of things, you have to be flexible in that way. And so, especially when it comes to like very different series or series for younger readers, I think it's important to have different expectations. And I said something similar to this with like the Percy Jackson books. I think that this book, I couldn't have asked for much more in a book of this series, in a final book of this series. I think this book does a really, really good job of wrapping up specifically what Throne of Glass is, for all of its beauty and all of its faults. I think that this book does a really great job of wrapping it up. And so I really enjoyed it.
Good.
Yeah, it was a blast. I can't believe we're done.
Can't believe we're done.
It's crazy. It feels so weird.
I know, a whole series. Our first, well, no, I guess we finished Percy Jackson.
We did, but my first full Sarah J. Maas series.
Oh my god.
I know, crazy. But yeah, those are our thoughts on the final book in the Throne of Glass series. Let us know what you think down below. Have you finished Throne of Glass? Did you like these? Were there any parts that you loved that I didn't mention, that we didn't mention? Or were there any parts that you hated that we loved? Let us know in the comments down below. We'd love to talk about it. Otherwise, thank you so much for going on this journey with us. I'm going to continue next month with ACOTAR, which is crazy.
My favorite series of all
continue my Sarah J. Maas journey. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching, and
we'll see you on our next adventure.